Forget urban legends tonight, real-life vacations turn into blood-chilling nightmares. What was meant to be paradise quickly descends into terror, and these true encounters will make you question if any getaway is ever truly safe. Late summer in Ontario draped itself over the lake like a warm, steady breath. Our condo sat where the trees paused for water, the forest hemming it in on three sides, the fourth given over to a dock and a sweep of pebbled shore. When the rest of the family wandered down to the beach with towels and coolers and the inflatable flamingo that always lost air by dusk, we stayed behind. It felt like a kindness to the silence, to the old boards of the porch, to the lake blades of light that shifted each time a fish turned under the surface. The porch chairs clicked when we leaned back. The hiss of a faraway highway rose and fell so gently that sometimes I mistook it for wind through needles. We talked about nothing, and in between we listened to the particular way this place listened back, how the trees accepted our words and gave them back as softened echoes. A loon called. Somewhere inland, a single dog barked and went quiet. It was the kind of afternoon that convinces you danger is a story other people tell. She burst out of the tree line so violently the air seemed to tear open. A woman, legs streaked green from grass and darker from mud, hair half caught in a branch, holding a baby tied to her chest with both arms like someone bracing for impact. Her eyes had that stunned, high-gloss look of a deer just before it bolts or crumples. She ran in a stumbling line that bent toward us as if pulled. "Please," she said, the word already breaking. "Please, can I?" Her voice snagged, she swallowed hard. "He's drunk. He hates her. She's not his. He said he'd." She couldn't finish. The baby made a sound that was not a cry so much as a hitching breath, like a match refusing to catch. We stood up so fast our chairs rocked. My partner's face shifted into the particular calm he gets when something is both wrong and solvable, and I envied him for it. "Come in," he said, already reaching. "Come in, you're safe here." The woman flinched as if the porch steps might give way. Her gaze flicked over her shoulder into the green. "He followed," she said, whisper thin. He said he'd be back with a gun." The words hit the boards and stayed. They didn't fly off into the woods, didn't lighten. It was as if the house itself absorbed them. Then the woods answered. A shape, broad and dark, hovered where the shadows gathered thickest. A man, legs braced in the underbrush, head cocked the way a bull tests the gate. Even at that distance I could feel the heat of his gaze. His voice slid across the grass, low and intimate, the way you speak to someone you want to break. "I'll be back," he said. "With a gun." The baby startled at the sound and tucked her face into the woman's neck. My partner stepped down from the porch, closing the space in 3 strides and planting himself on the lawn between the man and the steps. He didn't raise his voice. "You need to leave," he said. "Right now." The man watched him like he was choosing which rib to count. The tire tracks of old anger ran through his posture. Something passed across his face, recognition or calculation, and then he pivoted back into the trees, branches snapping as if the forest had to bruise to let him through. We didn't wait for the tremors to leave our hands. We guided the woman inside, set the chain lock, turned the deadbolt. The condo air smelled of cedar and last night's coffee. The baby's breath gusted against the woman's collarbone, the tiny fingers worked at the shoulder seam of her shirt as if the fabric itself might offer a better world. "Sit," I said, and she did. "Water?" She nodded. When I gave it to her, the glass clinked softly against her teeth. She told the story in pieces, as people do when they've been collecting fear in their mouths for hours. He'd been drinking since the long weekend started. He hated the baby because she belonged to a man who didn't stay long enough to matter. He wanted to go into town. He wanted to try the neighbor's shed lock for fun. He wanted to teach a lesson. The lesson kept changing. Her voice got quieter each time she said he wanted. "We called the police." I don't remember the words I used, only the way the dispatcher's voice widened when she heard the phrase with a gun and how she said the road out our way was a bit slow but the car was coming. Don't engage. Don't open the door. Day leaned into evening. The lake turned from glass to a dark plate that mirrored only the brightest things. The family texted from the beach that they were staying for sunset. We told them no, come up now. When they did, voices lowered themselves without being told. The first wrong sound came soon after. It wasn't a step or a shout. It was a rustle and a roll, like something heavy being turned through the wet at the very edge of the forest. We all went still, each of us pretending we had not heard it so we wouldn't have to explain its shape with words. Then the wind chimes on the porch trembled. There was no wind. The trees stood like congregants waiting for a blessing. And still the chimes tapped, not a melody but a nervous grinding like someone had put a key between two teeth and was testing the bite. We told ourselves it was thermal currents. We told ourselves late summer did odd things to metal. We told ourselves the kind of lies that keep a window from cracking. When we peeked out the side door toward the lane, tire tracks cut twin bruises into the wet grass fresh, their edges still holding. They led nowhere we recognized. Near the bottom of the steps, half in the shadow of the grill, a booster seat lay on its side like a thrown idea. The safety latch had snapped. The tail of broken plastic curled from its socket and made a tiny sound when the evening air moved. A sound like a fingertip tapping on a hollow table. A sound like a single stubborn consonant trying to decide what word to begin. Catch. I told no one I heard it. I couldn't figure out how to say the sound without summoning more of it. The police called to say they were close. Then they called to say a deer had jumped a ditch and the driver was shaken but fine and the second unit was taking a different route and could we please keep the doors locked and the porch light on. We turned the porch light on. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. Seconds later it gave a nervous shiver and settled again. A moth looped around it as if hypnotized by the idea of warmth rather than warmth itself. He returned just before midnight. We didn't see him at first. We felt him. The house gathered its boards under itself the way a cat gathers paws. The air in the hallway cooled 2 degrees in a breath. Then came the drag, metal drawn over gravel, a patient, unlovely sound that makes you think of basements and bad angles. My partner lifted the corner of the living room blind with 2 fingers and swore under his breath. The man stood just beyond the first row of trees in the humbled posture of someone who believes proximity is a weapon. He held something in his right hand that swung slightly with each breath, long, angled, secretive in the way utilitarian things can be when you imagine what else they might do. A tire iron. Or a lug wrench. Or the jack handle the car companies imagine you won't need very often. Moonlight hit his face in patches and made a stranger out of what I saw earlier. His mouth hung open just enough that each breath audibly navigated a throat roughened by liquor and tar. He made no attempt to hide the sound. He wanted us to measure the animal behind it. We watched him circle the house. We couldn't see all of it, but the mud told us in the morning, print after print, a halo of steps around us, as if he'd tried to walk us into a smaller and smaller shape. He didn't try the door. Not at first. He didn't need to. Whatever was hunting out there understood that anticipation can make a person open locks from the inside without touching them. Inside, we spoke with hands and eyebrows. The woman held her baby and rocked so gently the motion was nearly imaginary. At one point the baby matched her breath to her mother's, chest to chest, 2 small engines trying to stay idling. Then the door took the first hit. Not a fist. Not a kick. The measured thunk of metal against wood, a sound with a tail that said the person wielding it was listening carefully to what the house would do next. A second blow. And a third. He spoke. He said her name. He said it like he had been practicing all afternoon in a mirror. He rolled the vowels until they sounded like an apology and then let them land like an accusation. He told her he could be different. He told her he was already different. He told her the woods made him lonely and the lake made him sad and the quiet made him think about things he would prefer to forget. He told her the baby wasn't really the problem, and at the same time he told her the baby was the only problem. He told her no one would blame him if he felt what he felt. The lights blinked. Living room, off. Kitchen, on. Hallway, a smeary strobe. Then all dark. Then all bright. The bulb above the porch flared and then dimmed like a lung giving up. The fridge gave a heroic buzz as if it could keep the entire place alive by itself. Our phones lost a bar. Regained it. Lost two. The call to the dispatcher skittered and then came back as a thin wire of sound. Stay inside, the wire said, distorted. Stay static. IDE. The woman recognized the lullaby before I did. She had sung it earlier without meaning, to the way mothers hum their mothers' songs when they run out of words that belong to their own lives. Now the tune floated in from the trees, slightly too slow, slightly too clean, the syllables shaved smooth by cheap speakers. A recording, or someone trying very hard. The part of my mind that still did practical math divided possibilities into two with brutal efficiency. Either he had recorded her, or he had found the melody on his own and decided to own it. The baby lifted her head. For a second she looked toward the door with the unguarded hope reserved for the smallest and the faithless. The man's voice crawled under the door again, soft as a worn shirt. You don't have to be scared, he said. It had the weight of a threat. Something touched the porch boards. Not a step. A wade. A slow, luxuriously wet weight settling. The air smelled suddenly of old leaves and the metallic breath of lake water pulled up from its sleep. I pressed my palm to the wall, and the chilled damp carried through as if the wood had learned to sweat. I looked at the lake because my mind insisted on other facts, any facts, something neutral to anchor to. The surface held the moon with decent fidelity, but just off the dock a second bright oval tried to form and failed. As I stared, something clarified below the surface. Not a shape. A proposition. The feeling of being looked at from underneath. As if a person stood on the lake bed and lifted their face to see the night, and the water obliged by carrying their gaze to me. My heart threw itself against the inside of my ribs in a blind, repetitive protest. The door absorbed one more hit. The chain complained. The woman closed her eyes and breathed the way you breathe when a nurse says it will only sting a little. Don't open, my partner said, not to her but to the part of himself that wanted to go forward and be a wall. He held the phone to his ear and listened to the dispatcher breathe. The man at the door laughed then, a laugh with no mirth. It sounded like a clock that had learned sarcasm. He said her name again, and then mine, though I had never told it to him. He must have pulled it from the mail slot in the community box or from the name the dispatcher used on speaker earlier. He rolled it around, testing where it broke, and then pressed his tongue to that break as if flavor might leak out. When he stopped speaking, the lullaby continued for several seconds as if to prove it had never required him. Then that too clicked off. The chimes brushed themselves together in a small reflex metal greeting metal and stilled. Silence came the way snow does, with a soft authority that reminds you it is not an absence but a presence of its own. We did not open the door. We did not move the chain to test our own resolve. We listened until the house remembered it was a house and began its old complaints, ducts contracting, a refrigerator choosing to hum again. Somewhere in the trees a branch let go of another branch and the ground accepted their marriage without comment. When we finally slept, we did so in the shallow way people sleep on airports' benches or in hospital chairs, our bodies pretending to rest while our nerves kept night watch. Dawn walked the slope of the lawn in bare feet. The lake returned to glass with the sweet vanity of somebody who knows morning looks good on them. The sky wore a bruise where night had been but was otherwise clean. On the porch, a wet crescent darkened the boards beside the mat. In the center of that stain sat a booster seat. It appeared newer than the one we'd found before, the plastic more honest, the little fabric cover pattern bright with pretend stars. Water gathered along the edge and fattened until each drop committed to falling. It made a sound perhaps no one else would hear, the muffled click of a latch that has just given up the work of staying closed. Catch. The police knocked in pairs. Radios muttered on belts. They fanned out and read the mud like a faithful text. They told us they'd found drag marks near the road where something heavy had been pulled then lifted, pulled then lifted. They told us a neighbor had reported a man walking at 3 in the morning with some kind of bar, and another had reported the sound of someone practicing breathing just outside her bathroom window. They told us the man had a record that loved patterns. They told us what to do if he returned. He did not return to us. He returned to his habits and the places that tolerate them until they don't. The woman and her baby went to her sister's house 2 towns over, and then to an apartment with nicer numbers on the door than the rent seemed to justify. She found part-time work at a cafe and then full-time work at the register of a hardware store where she learned the names of bolts and the charm of a properly seating washer. She grew into her life as if she had always been saving a place for it. We saw her once, months later, in line at the pharmacy. The baby had learned a new laugh that mocked fear by sounding nothing like it. The woman's hair was shorter and to my eye, freer. She didn't see us, or if she did, she let the moment pass, as if resolve were something more easily preserved when not remembered in company. Years unspoiled. The condo sold to a couple who liked to entertain. The chimes rusted. The dockboards were replaced and then the replacements replaced in turn. If you ask me on a bright day what I remember most, I would tell you about the way blue can look like a place you could live. But at night in an unfamiliar hotel, when the HVAC ticks twice before fully starting and a child in the room next door argues with a parent about lights out and the hallway ice machine shudders awake as if offended by thirst, in those moments, a smaller sound wins. I hear the latch breaking. I hear the idea of safety choosing to revert to parts. Catch, catch. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not even particularly sinister if you don't know its origin. But I know it. I know it the way an old scar knows weather. Sometimes I catch myself listening for the rest of the sounds that tried to make a home in us that night: the measured breath, the fake lullaby, the wet board. They do not come. They have learned, perhaps, that too much repetition dulls fear. Or perhaps fear has learned to compress itself, to collapse into the smallest unit that still contains meaning. If there is a moral, I refuse to articulate it. The man who wanted to own a life he didn't make has fallen out of my narrative somewhere past the second winter. The woman belongs to her mornings now. She ties her apron, counts the till, doesn't sing unless she intends to. The lake continues its practice of pretending to be shallow until it reveals it isn't. The trees keep their counsel. And I, when I fasten a child into a seat in a friend's car or pass a shopping cart with its built-in plastic restraint, do not think of death. I think of how every safety requires a sound to announce itself, and how sometimes the same sound, small, precise, can also announce the moment safety stops. Catch. The syllable lands, a pebble on still water. The ripples travel farther and more quietly than anyone expects. I let them go. I let them go, and sleep comes, eventually, kind enough to pretend it is the first time. Winter in southern Germany didn't just arrive, it settled in. Snow pressed the city quiet and turned ordinary sounds cautious. I was 16, riding the same bus from a dorm on the edge of a municipal forest. The stop sign leaned as if listening to the road. On cold mornings the timetable frosted over, I had to breathe on the plastic to see the route, like kissing an appointment I didn't trust. The road cut a corridor through straight, orderly trees. Signs along the ditch wore rhyme, the words looked chewed, bittred and verboten, reduced to bitten consonants. Crows worked the verge, their calls ripping the muffled air like tape. The bus arrived with a diesel sigh. Inside smelled of wet wool and old cologne. I sat 3 rows from the back, left side, good sideline to the aisle. Regulars filed past, The coin bag man the driver always helped, the woman with the red scarf tied a different way each day. Then they boarded the Russian boys in tracksuits moving like weather, too loud, too present. Blue jacket led, bright as a summer toy in February. Black jacket followed, smiling late, watching everything. That morning Blue chose my seat. His shoulder pressed mine and stayed. He smelled of smoke and colder air than the one we'd come from. "Morning," he said, testing the word. I returned it because some syllables are reflex. He drummed the seat bar, walked a coin over his knuckles, let it drop and roll away. Black hooked one leg into the aisle behind us, gaze half idle, half owning. "Storm tonight," Blue said. "You have boots?" I nodded. He looked satisfied, like I'd passed a test I hadn't agreed to take. The bus slid past deer signs and black ice the driver knew by muscle memory. Crows lifted and the sound of their wings tucked itself between my shoulder blades. Blue's knee pressed into mine, withdrew. Then without warning his arm looped my neck and locked. Air vanished. My throat closed like a fist. The world narrowed to a bright tunnel while my pulse pounded at my ears. Even the snow sound changed, no longer soft, but hissing, metallic, as if each flake scraped glass. I clawed at his forearm. The grip was practiced, not angry, precise, demonstrative. Black produced a switchblade. Chick. The opening split the bus's noise. He held it loosely, almost playful, smiling like this could later be called a joke. After one more measured heartbeat, Blue released. Air stumbled back into me. Black folded the blade. Tack. Blue slapped my shoulder, shoved a cigarette into my palm I didn't take, and laughed. Their friends laughed. The driver saw boys. At school, the guard strolled over, accepted shrugs, and moved on. Teachers had timetables, not knives. That evening the news showed grainy footage, one of them robbing a shop with a toy gun, rumors of bigger crimes recruiting kids. Some were caught, others weren't. The broadcast ended. My pulse didn't. Days tried to be ordinary. On the bus I glanced at the window and froze. In the reflection behind me sat the boy in black, watching. I turned empty seat. The reflection lingered a fraction longer, then surrendered to my own pale face. Stress, I told myself. Brains do tricks. Still, he kept appearing in glass in bus windows, the station's steel panels, even a puddle of melted snow, always him, always in reflection, never in the seat itself. The city did its part to fray nerves, gray apartment blocks pressing close, underpasses that hummed with leftover electricity, stations emptying too quickly at dusk so shadows could stretch. I couldn't descend stairs without hearing it chick, blade opening, then tack, closing, arriving even when no one spoke, as if the sound traveled on breath. A storm rolled in sideways. The dorm's windows rattled. I lay awake long after lights out, listening to the building creak like a boat. Then I heard it, shoes grinding through crusted snow outside, slow and deliberate crunch, pause, crunch. The second sound followed, metal dragged along the iron railing, a thin, deliberate shriek, blade to paint, exposing raw steel. I crept to the window. My breath fogged the glass. The storm erased everything beyond into white static. As the condensation thickened, a fingertip traced a curve from the other side. A smile. Wide, precise, indifferent. It lingered as the fog thinned, then blurred, and vanished. Morning's light was the kind that denies night ever happened. Footprints, crisp as text, crossed the courtyard to the steps, paused, turned left. A clean silver scar ran the length of the railing. On the lobby's inner glass a faint droop of that same smile survived the falling condensation. At breakfast, nobody said anything real. I checked my phone, the boy in black had been arrested. Hours later, released insufficient evidence, no willing witnesses. A rumor of worse things under the surface. The article closed with hotline links that felt like fluorescent light. Life slotted back into shape. I kept my seat and kept catching him in reflections. The sound kept its two-beat residency in my head. I tried reason. Where did you see him? In glass. Who else saw? No one. What proof? The scar on the railing. The smile on the door. Winter is kind to illusions, but it leaves marks. Another storm rehearsed. I took different routes and arrived at the same places. I walked with a friend, laughed too loud, then asked, "Did you hear that?" She said, "Only you." I bought tape for rattling windows, batteries I didn't need, and a plant I couldn't keep alive. The clerk said, "They like light," then looked at the sky and laughed. Night taught the building new noises. Doors tightened then relaxed in their frames, radiators clanked out their grievances. I lay still, counting the seconds between clicks to prove time still existed. Sleep came, left, returned with nothing in its hands. On the worst night, wind turned the courtyard into organ pipes. Snow hurled itself at the glass. Heat sulked. The storm owned the soundscape until one noise mussed its hair. Crunch, pause, crunch. I knew the cadence now. My breath shortened on its own. The scrape followed blade on rail, teeth on coin. Go away, I whispered to no one a storm could carry. The glass fogged again. The fingertip drew the same smile, perfect, exact. A second line began, hesitated, stopped. Cheer stayed alone. I didn't scream or call the guard to deliver awkward sentences. I sat on the floor and counted the spaces between crunches, not to measure him but to teach my body the clock hadn't broken. Eventually the storm made whatever walked there, or it left. Morning unrolled its white pages. New footprints signed the courtyard. The railing scar had a fresh branch, a sideways Y catching the light. The smile on the door had smeared into a droop where the heat failed in the night. News contradicted itself, arrest, release, gone, not gone, boy, man, mistake. The police asked for witnesses. No one volunteered to say their name under fluorescent light. Spring pretended none of it had happened. The birches opened fists into leaves, bike path symbols reappeared, and vowels returned to the signs. The crows moved their work to fields. Bus windows dried and revealed only what was already there. In glass I saw only myself, unless I caught a flicker and chose not to test it. Years smudged the edges. I moved to a new city, a different bus route, another driver who covered a missing coin as ritual. New radiators, new boots in the hall, new windows to fog. I told the story once, the listener said the right things. None of it changed the way a certain winter sound still finds me. When cold truly arrives, breath makes ropes again. In a quiet station, the air feels electric and empty at once. Out of that hush a two-beat comes chick, opening, tack, closing, and my throat remembers blues forearm, my eyes remember a smile traced in water. Some headline occasionally floats by, released due to lack of evidence, and I put my phone face down because no verdict changes how old fear keeps its tools clean. I don't pretend to know which reflections were real and which belonged to the brain's expensive illusions. I know the railing was scarred. I know the smile existed. I know my body learned a rhythm and refuses to forget it. Every winter the city's silence feels older than its streets. Snow falls soft until it doesn't, and each flake taps the glass like a tiny piece of metal. I breathe, the window fogs, for a second a curve appears perfect, indifferent, then vanishes. The season holds its breath. I let mine go. And somewhere, almost polite, the old sound returns, light, precise, patient.